Imagine a January morning in the high plains of South Dakota. The wind is screaming across the prairie at 50 miles per hour. The temperature has dropped to a bone-chilling minus 20 degrees. Most living things are either frozen solid or hiding deep underground. Now imagine walking across your backyard, past your snow-covered porch, and stepping into a literal hole in the earth. You walk down a few dirt steps, and suddenly the wind dies. The silence is heavy, and as you push through a makeshift wooden door, the air hits you. It's not freezing, it's not even cold. It is a humid, balmy 70 degrees. You aren't looking at a high-tech laboratory or a bunker powered by a massive diesel generator. You are looking at a few rows of vibrant green kale, ripening tomatoes, and, impossibly, a small lemon tree. All of this is thriving while the world above is a white wasteland. Total cost for this miracle? $50. A couple of rolls of plastic sheeting, some reclaimed, timber, and a lot of sweat. This is the Walipini. It's an Aymara Indian word for place of warmth, and it is a piece of ancient engineering that makes our modern, expensive glass greenhouses look like primitive toys. But here is the part that should make your blood boil. In 18 states across the US and in dozens of counties across the UK and Australia, building this simple hole in the ground can get you a heavy fine, a court summons, or a visit from a demolition crew. If you tried to build this in certain parts of Florida or California, the state wouldn't see a sustainable garden. They would see an unpermitted subsurface structure. They see a safety hazard, or at least that's what the official paperwork says. Why is a $50 DIY project, based on principles that our medieval ancestors understood better than we do, suddenly a legal liability? We live in an era where we are told to be green, to be sustainable, and to reduce our footprint. Yet the moment a citizen finds a way to grow their own food year-round without a single cent going to the local power company, the red tape starts appearing. It's a paradox that doesn't make sense until you look at who actually wins when you stay dependent on the grid. Today, we are digging deep. We're going to look at the geothermal science that allows a dirt pit to stay at a constant 54 degrees regardless of the weather. We're going to explore the forgotten medieval pit houses that kept peasants alive during the Little Ice Age. And most importantly, we are going to expose the real reasons why local governments are so desperate to keep you from digging a hole in your own backyard. Because as it turns out, the safety concerns cited by bureaucrats might just be a smokescreen for something far more calculated. And it all started with a single man in the mountains of Bolivia who decided that the winter didn't have to mean hunger. But as his neighbors began to copy him, the local authorities noticed something they couldn't allow. To understand why this design is being suppressed today, we have to go back to the early 1990s, to the frozen, wind-swept plains of the Bolivian Altiplano. At 13,000 feet above sea level, the sun is a laser during the day, and the nights are a literal death sentence for plants. For decades, the indigenous Aymara people struggled to grow anything more than hardy tubers. Then, a team from the Benson Institute arrived with a radical idea. They didn't bring expensive solar panels or double-glazed glass. They brought shovels. They dug a rectangular pit 6 to 8 feet deep. They covered it with 2 layers of cheap plastic film, and they waited. What they discovered changed the world of sustainable farming forever. While the outside air plummeted to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, the inside of this Walipini stayed at a steady 60 degrees. Without a heater, without electricity, just by using the Earth as a battery. You see, the physics here are mind-blowing but simple. Think of the ground beneath your feet as a giant thermal sponge. If you go just 6 to 8 feet down, the temperature of the soil stays almost constant year-round. It's usually between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of whether there's a blizzard or a heat wave on the surface. This is called thermal inertia. By sinking the greenhouse into the earth, you aren't just sheltering the plants from the wind. You are wrapping them in a massive, warm blanket that has been soaking up sun for months. By the time the winter cold finally manages to penetrate 6 feet of earth, it's already spring on the surface. The heat from the previous summer is literally still there, waiting for you. It's the ultimate hack. A traditional glass greenhouse is a thermodynamic nightmare. It gains heat fast during the day and loses it even faster the moment the sun sets. It's basically a glass tent. But the Wallapini? It's a fortress. It stores the day's energy in its dirt walls and releases it slowly throughout the night. When the Benson Institute published their findings, showing that a farmer could build a year-round food source for the price of a few bags of groceries, it should have been the start of a global revolution. People from Idaho to Inner Mongolia started digging. It was the open-source answer to food insecurity. But as the movement crossed the borders into the developed world, it hit a wall that no shovel could penetrate. Because in the eyes of the modern legal system, a $50 solution to a $20,000 problem isn't a miracle. It's a threat to the status quo. We like to think we are at the pinnacle of human civilization. We have smartphones, fiber optic internet, and climate-controlled skyscrapers. We look back at the people of the early Middle Ages, the so-called Dark Ages, and we pity them. We imagine them shivering in drafty wooden shacks, huddled around a dying fire while the winter winds tore through the walls. But the archaeological record tells a very different and much more embarrassing story. Our ancestors weren't stupid. In fact, when it came to energy efficiency, they were light years ahead of us. Between the 5th and 12th centuries, across what is now Germany, England, and Scandinavia, the most common type of building wasn't a castle or a cottage. It was the Grubenhaus. The name literally translates to pit house or sunken floored building. These weren't just holes in the ground for the poor, they were sophisticated thermal regulators. A typical Grubenhaus was dug about 3 to 4 feet into the earth. By doing this, the inhabitants weren't just avoiding the wind. They were plugging themselves into the same geothermal battery we discussed in the last chapter. While a standard wooden hut would lose all its heat in an hour, the Grubenhaus stayed stable. Archaeologists have found evidence that these structures were used for everything from weaving to food storage and housing. Why? Because the earth kept the temperature perfect for delicate work. In the summer, it was a natural refrigerator. In the winter, it was a sanctuary. They didn't need a $400 a month utility bill to stay alive during the Little Ice Age. They just needed the ground. But here is the shocking part. As we moved into the modern era, we abandoned this wisdom. We started building up instead of down. We traded thermal stability for visual prestige. We moved into thin-walled boxes that require a constant, expensive infusion of electricity or gas just to remain habitable. We became energy slaves. Today, if you tried to build a Grubenhaus in your suburban backyard to store your winter harvest, your local zoning officer wouldn't call it ancient wisdom. They would call it a violation of the building code. They would cite ventilation requirements or structural integrity. But if a peasant in 800 AD could build a structure that lasted decades using nothing but timber and dirt, why is it suddenly unsafe for us? The truth is, the more independent you are from the grid, the less power the system has over you. And that brings us to the most controversial part of this story, because when you look at the specific 18 states where these greenhouses are restricted, you start to notice a very strange pattern in who owns the land and the energy. So, which are these forbidden states? If you look at the maps of the Pacific Northwest, the high deserts of the Southwest, and the dense suburbs of the Northeast, from Oregon and California to New York and Georgia, you'll find a common enemy. It isn't a single anti-greenhouse law. It's something much more subtle and much harder to fight. It's called the IRC, or the International Residential Code. Most people think building codes are there to keep your house from falling down in an earthquake. And for the most part, they are. But the IRC has a section for everything. It dictates the height of your ceilings, the size of your windows, and exactly how much light must enter a room. The moment you dig a hole and put a roof over it, the state stops seeing a garden. They start seeing a subsurface structure. In at least 18 states, the local adoption of these codes creates a catch-22 that makes the $50 Walipini effectively illegal. For example, in many counties in Florida or Virginia, any structure that is attached to the ground and exceeds a certain square footage, usually 120 to 200 square feet, requires a full engineering set. We're talking about blueprints that can cost $2,000 just to prove that a hole in the dirt is stable. But it gets worse. Because the Walipini is underground, it's often classified as a basement or a cellar by overzealous inspectors. That means you are suddenly required to have egress points, multi-thousand-dollar emergency exits, and professional ventilation systems that would cost 10 times the price of the actual greenhouse. I spoke to one man in Georgia who tried to build a small sunken lemon grove. He was told he needed a drainage plan signed by a state-certified hydrologist because his pit might interfere with the local water table. Why the obsession with such extreme regulation for a hole in the ground? Follow the money. A traditional glass above-ground greenhouse is easy to tax. It's visible. It's an improvement to the property that can be appraised. But a Walipini? It's invisible from the street. It doesn't use the electrical grid. It doesn't show up on a satellite heat map. In the eyes of a tax assessor, an underground greenhouse is a ghost structure. It provides value to the owner, free food, free heat, without providing a single cent of revenue to the state or the utility companies. When you start looking at the specific counties where these bans are most strictly enforced, you notice they often overlap with areas where the cost of living is skyrocketing. The state doesn't want you to be a ghost. They want you on the grid. They want you traceable. And they definitely don't want you discovering that you don't need them. But there is one specific technicality in the law that the bureaucrats are terrified you'll find out. A loophole that lets you bypass the codes entirely. If you've ever dealt with a local zoning board, you know they act like they have the power of a medieval king. They tell you where you can dig, what you can build, and how much you have to pay for the privilege. But here's the secret. Every king has a weakness. And for the bureaucrats of the IRC, that weakness is found in the definitions. In many of the 18 states where underground greenhouses are restricted, there is a powerful legal shield known as the Right to Farm Act. These laws were originally designed to protect commercial farmers from city people moving to the country and complaining about the smell of cows. But savvy self-sufficiency advocates have found that these acts can be used as a high-velocity battering ram against building codes. In states like Michigan or Missouri, if you can prove that your structure is primarily for agricultural use, you may be exempt from the vast majority of residential building codes. The state might demand a $2,000 permit for a basement, but if that same hole in the ground is officially a low-cost seasonal crop production facility, the rules suddenly change. The inspectors hate this because it strips them of their power to dictate your ceiling height or your ventilation brand. Then there is the movable structure trick. In many jurisdictions, a building is only a building if it has a permanent foundation. This is why you see people building walipinis with earthbag walls or reclaimed timber rather than poured concrete. If it isn't permanently attached to the earth in the eyes of the law, it's often classified similarly to a temporary garden shed or a high tunnel. It's a legal gray area where you can grow enough food to feed a family of 4 without ever signing a single government form. But don't think for a second that the authorities are taking this lying down. When they can't get you on zoning, they go for the nuclear option. They claim your underground greenhouse is a threat to public safety. They talk about structural collapse or asphyxiation from CO2 buildup. They paint a picture of a dangerous dirt tomb that could cave in at any moment. It sounds responsible, doesn't it? Who wouldn't want to prevent a collapse? But when you look at the statistics, the argument starts to fall apart. There are thousands of these structures across South America and Eastern Europe that have stood for 50 years without a single accident. Meanwhile, modern code-compliant homes are built with materials that burn to the ground in minutes. The safety argument is almost always a facade, because when you look at the real data, the most dangerous thing about a $50 greenhouse isn't the dirt walls. It's what those walls represent, because the state isn't actually worried about the roof falling in on you. They are worried about what happens when you realize you no longer need their grocery stores. Have you ever stopped to wonder why the grocery store feels like a casino? There are no windows, no clocks, and the prices seem to fluctuate based on global events you have zero control over. This isn't an accident. We live in a world of extreme centralization. In the United States and Europe, the average piece of food on your dinner plate travels roughly 1,500 miles before it reaches your fork. 1,500 miles of diesel fuel, refrigerated shipping containers, and middlemen taking their cut. This is what we call the industrial food grid. And the $50 walipini is a direct physical threat to its existence. Think about the economics for a second. A massive industrial greenhouse in the Netherlands or Almeria, Spain, uses millions of dollars worth of glass, steel, and automated climate control. They burn natural gas to keep things warm in the winter. They use high-intensity lighting to mimic the sun. All of those costs are passed down to you. But more importantly, all of those costs are taxable. Every kilowatt of energy they buy, every gallon of fuel their trucks burn, and every dollar they charge you at the checkout is a data point for the state. Now, look at the guy with the hole in his backyard. His energy bill is zero. His transportation cost is the distance from his back door to his garden, maybe 30 feet. He isn't buying plastic-wrapped tomatoes from halfway across the continent. He isn't paying the carbon tax embedded in the logistics chain. He is quite literally invisible to the economic machine. This is the real reason behind the aggressive zoning laws in those 18 states. It's not about the roof collapsing, It's about the fact that self-sufficiency is a form of economic rebellion.